Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I've got a great stream with a great guest that I think you're really going to enjoy. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that July 4th is coming up. And if you have never tried the Blaze TV app, if you've never gotten the full access to Blaze TV, please make sure to check out the free trial that's coming up. You can get a 7-day free trial on Blaze TV. You just head to blazetv.com/Auron. That's blazetv.com/Auron, and you can get your 7-day free trial. The promo code ends on July 4th at midnight, so you want to make sure that you get it started soon. Again, once again, that is blazetv.com/Auron. All right, so Elon Musk has been on a bit of a crash out cycle. We saw the first one a little bit during the HB1 conflict over Christmas. And then the life cycle started to shorten a little bit. It seemed like every few months there was one thing or another that Elon got pretty emotional about and kind of split away from the Trump base on. And recently, we've seen another flare up. Now, when the first bill came out, when the big, beautiful bill came out, and it looked like Elon was not going to get many of the things that he wanted, including certain cuts, but very importantly, also the subsidies for his electric vehicle business. He had a real problem with that. He became very angry at Donald Trump, made a lot of accusation. There was a lot of heat. Now, eventually, Elon Musk realized, I think, that that was a mistake. He walked back a number of those statements, especially the most egregious one, said he regretted going out and talking about them. But at the time, he threatened to primary any Republicans that ultimately would support this level of spending. Well, the big, beautiful bill has now passed through the Senate, and this has triggered Elon on another one of his tirades. I don't know why, because obviously the same issues that existed previously when he said he overstepped are still present in the current bill. But nevertheless, Elon declared his intention to start a new party, the America Party, which actually just sounds a lot like a Alice Cooper song, if you're familiar with some of his earlier work. But he said he's going to start this new party, and it's going to be based on not spending too much money. It just kind of sounds like the Libertarians again. But for some reason, Elon thinks this one's going to be different. Joining me to discuss the current Elon crash out is the Prudentialist. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me on, Auron. It seems like that half-life keeps rapidly decaying every time Elon wants to crash out over a particular issue. So yeah, thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. And yeah, this one was, again, very strange because he recognized earlier that he went too far. I understand his concerns with the budget. I'm not saying that those are completely invalid, obviously. But ultimately, Elon has struggled with this. He attacked Trump over it, but he did the mea culpa at the end, right? He said, okay, I realize I went too far with some of these issues and I need to dial it back some and maybe trust that I don't understand every part of the political process. And yet here we are again in exactly the same situation. And I want to talk about a couple of things when it comes to this bill, because again, from the outset, I recognize that this bill is not perfect. It's very far from perfect. In fact, there's a lot of pork in it. There's too much spending. There's not the cuts that ultimately a lot of fiscal hawks would like, especially the libertarian portion of the right. And yet you're in the scenario where you have to make choices. And I don't like that you have to do that. We're famously not giant fans of democracy around these parts. But while the game is being played, these are the rules, right? You have to give, you have to take, you have to find your victories where you can. You have to get a sufficient coalition to move forward together. And that means you're going to have to give up certain things. And unfortunately, a number of those things are spending items. Americans love to get free money. Politicians love to get the power that comes when they are distributing their benefits both to their donor class and to their constituents. Political power is, for better or for less, in a democracy, mainly determined by your ability to give stuff to different groups. And this is something that has always been very difficult, I think, for libertarians to grasp. But this becomes particularly difficult when it comes to the trade-offs of a bill like this. For you and me, deportations, border security are the issue. Yeah, we're not single issue voters. I don't think. I'll let you speak for yourself. But this is as close as it comes for us. This is the defining issue, because if you change the demographic composition of the United States, you change the United States forever. Not just because of the culture, but also because of our political system, which grants popular sovereignty to the people who've been given citizenship. And so if you're allowing a bunch of people to come in, get birthright citizenship or naturalize, then eventually you're going to have this scenario where there's just too many voters who aren't really of original American founding stock and are going to want to change things in the direction of the countries they come from for their benefit. So we have to win on this issue. But for libertarians, the budget is the core issue. And again, I'm not saying that the American spending spree is not suicidal. It is. Like we're heading towards a fiscal cliff. This is a huge problem. But we have an order of operations issue here, right? Like if you want to change the way the country votes, you have to stop letting Democrats change who's in the country. And yet for the libertarians, they have it backwards. They think that if they could just stop the spending, if they could just get the bill they want when it comes to spending, then all of a sudden everyone will just kind of vote for maybe closed borders for the libertarians that want closed borders, though a number of them don't. And so you end up in this scenario where you're misallocating their priorities. And so you have guys who with a libertarian bit fighting over like how much of how much debt Greater Mexico will be in once it conquers the United States. And that's just kind of not the point at this moment. So I guess the question is there any hope that some of these guys will eventually understand that deportations, that controlling the population and who gets to vote, these things will actually help you with the budget in the long term if you just grasp the ramifications of what's going on with the voting process here?
Well, I think that when it comes to our own congressional system, that if you are in a reliably safe gerrymandered seat, odds are you're not really going to have to worry about any potential political competition when you've got, Congress averages what, a 92% on average re-election rate. There are very few districts throughout the entire country that are considered competitive. There are like 2 districts in the state of Texas, for example, that are competitive, and Texas has, several dozen at this point, congressional seats in the House of Representatives. So, I mean, for Thomas Massie in Kentucky, this isn't particularly a problem for him or others that might be considered fiscal hawks as well. It's only really when you realize your political career is essentially over in perhaps a not so safe seat like that of former Representative Justin Amash up in Michigan that you kind of want to pull out and realize that this isn't so much your concern, because you're still going to get reelected, or the odds of you getting reelected are very high, and that you have a sizable support base both with the donor class as well as people in the media sphere that want to echo your points or to strengthen you. You're not going to do it. And I mean, for people like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie, you have the world's richest man on your side, alongside a lot of people on Twitter and other media platforms that are backing you up. So I don't think that they're really going to be concerned about the issue. Although I hate doing this, and I hate pointing out like my hypocrisy, but it is kind of important to realize that, Thomas Massie and others had constantly voted to raise the debt ceiling under President Biden and under President Barack Obama and other administrations that they may not have been friendly with during previous times that the debt or spending legislation had been made. They have done good work on a variety of issues. I will respect Rand Paul and Thomas Massie endlessly when it came to the issue about unwarranted political surveillance on American citizens, when it came to things dealing with, FISA warrants and the National Security Agency. But on this issue, I think you and I both recognize the priority. I'm not a single voter or a single issue voter, although sometimes I feel like I get close. But it is about immigration. It's about raising, ICE in their budget from, upwards to $43 billion, which it should be way more than that. But this is a step in the right direction, and everyone knows, and as this administration has echoed, this is a border bill. This is above all else about security, about border security, and facilitating and expediting deportations. Everyone from Stephen Miller to Trump to Tom Homan had said this bill will allow us to actually do the thing that we were elected to do. And so to see this sort of theatrical part come from those in Congress, those who have a more fiscally conservative bent, or those like with the Cato Institute and the Libertarians raising issues about the finances, yeah, those are legitimate issues. But at the end of the day, the concern about the debt doesn't matter if the United States functionally no longer exists in the Anglo-Protestant Republican tradition that it was founded on. Because once that goes away, the debt becomes the secondary issue, because you functionally do not have a country anymore.
It's so frustrating. It seems so short-sighted and in some ways dishonest. And I've defended Thomas Massie several times to people to my right. Said, look, this is a guy who's principled. I don't agree with him on everything, but this is a guy who's fighting what he believes in. He's good on some important issues, and so we need to find a way to like work with this guy and figure it out. But I really, honestly, this bill made me see Massey in a different light, and he came into my mentions, and posted charts to try to show me I'm wrong. But like you said, Massey has voted for spending in the past. He's voted for raising the debt ceiling in the past. It's not like in principle he will just never cast a vote for this stuff. And also, both he and Rand Paul tried to, oh, well, it's about the pork barrel, it's about these things. Okay, I can go with that. But then both of these guys started finagling over the funding of ICE, right? Like finagling over the funding of the border wall. Well, we only need this many $1 million or this many $1 billion to solve the problem. We don't need, this is 20 billion too much. It's 45 or 50 billion. We could do it for 20. Well, no, actually we couldn't. We haven't done it at any point. So like sitting there and telling me that exactly the number at which we could get this job done seems pretty insane to me. Also, yes, I understand that seems like a large amount of money now, but think about the money you will save. Think about the money you will save by not having to educate the children of illegal immigrants. Think about the money you will save by not having to fund the healthcare of illegal immigrants, the food programs, the housing assistance, the small business loans, all of the graft that illegal immigrants are able to obtain by coming into the United States and getting all these benefits. Think of the crime, the cost of housing, the safety of the roads. Think about all the things that will change when you are able to drive down illegal immigration, deport the worst offenders, and encourage self-deportation by so many of these people. It's so short-sighted to look at this and say, oh, well, I'm going to fight over the cost of enforcing the border. This just gives the lie to the idea that this is about the pork, right? If it was about the pork, you would have attacked the pork. But instead, you're directly saying the problem is the amount of money we're spending on border security. If there's one thing I actually want the government to take my money and do, it's defend the border with it. Now, I understand that every time the government spends money, there's going to be a amount of waste in it, a large amount of waste in it. I get that. But the state isn't going anywhere, kids. So guess what? If the state's going to do anything with my money, please let it at least waste the money in the category of defending the border. Because again, not only are you saving all of the money from illegal immigrants not being here, which is huge, it's actually a vast amount of money, well more than you'll spend on the border security, but also you're saving all of the money that you will get when they eventually don't vote Democrat. Like if you let these people stay in the country, they will become Democrat voters. And you will never get small government because, as you point out, small government is not a universal principle. It's a principle that is fundamentally founded in the Anglo tradition. The obsessive desire to place restrictions on government is particularly Anglo. It's not even European. I mean, you have more absolute kings in places like France, but in England, there's always this restriction on the king. There's always this restriction on government. This is a deeply Anglo tradition. Other people can adopt it, but if you completely root out the people who founded the tradition, you will not have the tradition. And so this is, again, it just fails in every other area. It fails to recognize the savings you will receive by the deportations itself. It's arguing the actual thing that you want the government to do, and it's short-sighted, not understanding the impact this is going to have on policy and voting going forward. It just fails in every area that libertarians pretend to care about, and yet they're just sitting there like, but I saw a number on the spreadsheet that said that the budget will go up or down, and so that's the only thing I'm capable of addressing.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, when we're looking at this sort of short-term impulsiveness to virtue signal, sure, there is the congressional impetus to always have the virtue signaling or the flag waving done to raise money. That way you have a war chest available for the next election because, as you and I both know, and we're not the world's biggest democracy appreciators, but when your system of staying in power and the ability to implement policy changes virtually every 2 years, you have to do everything in your ability to enrich yourself now because you can't really think about the future because the, electioneering cycle for fundraising and campaigning is probably going to end in probably the next few months. And then the cycle for fundraising and campaigning for primaries are about to begin. And this is very real for people like Elon Musk or for Thomas Massey because they're concerned. And I think even Donald Trump had put on Truth Social that he is going to happily have someone run against Thomas Massey and that they're going to win bigly or whatever. And so it does illustrate the political pressures here. And I mean, we've talked about this before when we've discussed Nick Land on the show previously, where it's just, listen, in a democratic system, you don't know how long you're going to be in power, so you're going to do whatever policy you can to enrich yourself and enrich your guys, because you may be out of office next time. This is why you see all these guys take these sort of principled positions saying, like, well, if we do this, then Democrats can use this stuff against us, or Republicans can use it in the future. You've seen that argued about the filibuster in the Senate, or certain procedural rules in the House of Representatives, or even with, executive orders in the White House. And so for us, I think it behooves us to really recognize here that everyone's sort of playing for what gets the attention and what gets the media. And of course, this can disrupt the agenda that this administration is trying to do. I don't know Trump from Adam. I don't know if he is a guy who really does think about the long-term future, but I know that he's got people in his administration that certainly do, Stephen Miller being one of them. And they are very much concerned that, in the same way that you and I are, that if you fundamentally replace the people that are already here, America as a nation functionally ceases to exist, which means that, you're going to have less competent, less competent people running at the head of government, and you're going to have basically the same kind of third world politics that these people tried to escape from by immigrating here, run the system. And I know damn well for a fact that if we look at various other fiscal crises throughout, Central and South America, or in North African or even African countries just in general, that once they hit a particular area of debt crisis and they don't have the power to back it up, then all of a sudden, like, that country goes into economic ruin for generations. And so I think that it would behoove Mr. Massey and others to consider all this, thinking, do I keep the ship afloat demographically to where I can solve these problems in the long term? Or do I stand on my principles and realize that getting the fiscal ship righted will become a virtual impossibility as you have more and more people in Congress and in the state and federal level celebrating the independence days of foreign countries, like we saw yesterday with Ilhan Omar celebrating the 65th year of independence for Somalia, not, celebrating the United States of America because she's not an American. So I think it really just becomes these clear problems is, do you want to pass the greatest marshmallow test in political history, or do you want the marshmallow now just to feel good for 5 seconds?
Well, and that's the thing, right? So there was I forget the idiot's name from Cato, but there's libertarian Cato guy, on Twitter saying, well, winning would be nice, but principles are what matter, right? Like, if it win every once in a while, that'd be nice, and but the principles are what matter. It's like, brother, if you do not have power, your principles don't do anything. Oh, great, I have principles abstractly somewhere. Okay, cool. But you never have power. So guess what? Those principles are never enacted and someone else's principles are. So it's not about me telling you, hey, don't have principles. The question is, do you care about those principles in a real and actionable way? Or are those principles just something you do to, like, stroke your ego when you think everybody's watching? Do you actually want your agenda implemented? Do you want to take steps towards victory? Or is it all about standing there abstractly saying, I'm smarter than you, I'm better than you, I'll never have an opportunity to see if any of this stuff gets realized, but no, theoretically, that, should I ever have this victory I don't know how to achieve, then all of these things will happen. Clearly, there's no path forward for most libertarians to realize what they're trying to achieve. But what you can see in this bill is some big wins, right? We get the border security. We get a big increase in border funding and border security for the wall, for ICE, enabling the deportations. Also, we see a tax on remittances. Now, sadly, it was neutered down to 1%. We originally had 3.5%, I believe, and then it
5% to 3.5 to 1.
I thought it started at 3.5, and then Schmidt introduced the amendment to bump it to 5, and then it got negotiated back down to 1. But either way, the order of operations is immaterial. The point is, it got dickered down to 1%, which is not enough, but it's a start. At least it exists now, right? It's a improvement over what existed before. And very importantly, there was some confusion. I got confused too, because there was a perfunctory vote on the floor. There's like basically this cosmetic vote, the show vote, to get all the Democrats to openly have to vote to keep illegal immigrants on Medicaid. And so they voted in order to say that this had to happen. But it was not actually removed from the bill. The portion of the bill that removed illegal immigrants from Medicaid was not removed. So as my understanding is, or at least according to Senator Eric Schmidt, the current incarnation of the bill that passed addresses the fact that 14 states plus Washington, D.C. basically allow illegal immigrants to get on Medicaid. The way that they have it is you're not allowed to ask about immigration status for providing the health care. The new bill basically makes that impossible. So the blue states that were doing this and were getting Medicaid money to provide that health care now have to make the choice of, if you want to keep paying for the illegal immigrants and their health care, you're going to need to pay that directly out of your pocket. So they're estimating that's about 1.4 million people off of Medicare. I don't know how much that saves you, but I'm going to guess it's in the neighborhood of several $billions. That could easily recoup what you're trying to spend on border security. And so it's just these, there are wins in this bill. It's far from perfect. I wish there was a different system where we could just get everything we want. If you're interested in getting that system started, let me know. But otherwise, inside the system we currently had, this was a win and is heading towards solving a problem that is critical to solving more problems that libertarians actually care about down the line. And yet we just couldn't have the ability to understand that in the short term.
Yeah, and this is the important thing here is that even people on the left had acknowledged this, and which is it's a cold day in hell when someone on the left says something that I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. Where I think, ironically, I think it was like Pete Buttigieg who said it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, there's going to be some ugly stuff in this bill, and he is correct. Like, there's plenty of things in here for pork and whatnot that we're all going to find objectionable. And this is where I would agree with Thomas Massey and Rand Paul that these giant mega bill omnibus packages that we tend to debate in Congress are absolutely horrible, because all that it does is that it allows you to grandstand on the one or two pet issues that you think are great, while this god-awful piece of legislation that doesn't really do much for the American people usually gets passed. And I've said it before, like, the 5 most honest minutes of congressional history I've ever seen in my lifetime was when former Senator Ben Sasse, during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings in the first Trump administration, said that Congress has essentially adjudicated its power. It writes these shell pieces of legislation and tells the secretaries or the administrative bureaucrats in charge over in the executive branch to basically write the laws for themselves. And that becomes policy, which is why the Supreme Court is the politics of last resort in the United States of America. So for bills like this, yeah, there's going to be stuff in there that's ugly. There's going to be stuff in there that we don't like. But when it comes to making sure blue states have to pay out of pocket for their xenophilia and their love for illegal immigrants and other people who shouldn't be in this country, they should pay for that. And we should be disbarring services that are in place for American citizens due to their circumstances, either due to indigency or because of like medical conditions like end-stage renal disease. That should be for Americans only. It should not be paying for people who shouldn't be in this country to begin with, who are criminal aliens. It's the same thing with, massively increasing the size of our Customs and Border Patrol and everything when it comes to border security to billions of dollars. Like, it could go up higher. The same thing with the remittance taxes. But for the fact that for the first time that in this administration, there's finally movable pieces of legislation, actual law on the books, rather than just like 5 or 6 pieces of legislation that Congress has passed, some of them just being small amendments to things, or the Lake and Riley Act, which is also good. But this Congress, controlled on both houses by Republicans, haven't delivered anything for this administration, haven't delivered anything for the American people, really does illustrate 3 things. One, that it doesn't matter that they're Republicans. They're not really on Trump's side or MAGA. They're still following the old ways of the establishment. They're happy to stay along with the Uniparty. And secondly, that, all of this can easily be undone if a Democrat is to get into office, or as we've been continuously seeing since Trump took office, the courts can easily just overstep and overbound through judicial tyranny and activism. So having something in the law would be the best option we have to have anything, put into ink, put under the law books, actually concretized as policy out of this administration. Because if not, all we're going to do is watch Congress and watch the courts twiddle their thumbs and play administrative, grab butt to make sure that this administration, the momentum of trying to restore American sovereignty, does not happen. These people would happily sell life rafts and life preserve jackets as the Titanic sinks and not consider what they can do to, either fix the ship or right it, and instead just get rich selling, the seats on the life raft to their friends and whatnot.
Well, and so Elon comes out of this, right? And he's so disgusted with the spending and whatnot. He says, well, I'm going to make my own party, the America Party. and we're gonna have blackjack and hookers and like all this stuff. And so he starts talking about how he's gonna primary these people, he's gonna support people like Thomas Massey, and he's gonna drive out all these corrupt Republicans that voted for the bill, and he's gonna oppose all this stuff. And it just feels so delusional because look, we already have this party. It's called the Libertarian Party, right? They save. They're going to save money. They're going to run the budget down. They're going to do all this stuff. They have no purchase, right? It goes nowhere every year. Every year we're promised this is going to be the year of the Libertarians. No matter how bad the candidates from the Republican, the Democratic Party are, somehow the Libertarian candidate is always more embarrassing. I don't know how they manage it, but they do it time after time after time. And I don't understand how Elon doesn't understand this, right? Like, I guess I do, right? Because I've seen the libertarian mind at work. I see this numbers. I see numbers on the spreadsheet, and I want the numbers to go down. And so I'll just make the party that makes the numbers go down with no thought of like what politics actually does. What is politics? And I think we've probably all seen this chart. But they have that the grid of where voters are, and the libertarian corridor is completely bare. There's just no constituency for libertarians. The socially liberal, fiscally conservative corner of the political map is just it's completely cleared out. And the reason is very simple. Whether you like libertarians are right about this, well, I'll give you the your one caveat here. The state exists to take things from some people and hand them to other people. That's how the state maintains power, along with the monopoly on violence and everything else. It rearranges assets in the favor of different constituencies. You may hate that. You may think that's stupid. I'm not a fan of democracy either, but this is true across multiple forms of government, not just democracy. And if you don't have anything to offer people, if your stance is literally, we are the state and we will do nothing, then you literally have nothing to offer people politically, because the purpose politically of the state is to do this redistribution shuffle. It is patronage. And so if you do not have something you can offer, be it a social conservatism, be it border security, be it the distribution to your supporters of some kind of financial benefit or jobs, if you have nothing to hand people, they will go to people who are handing them stuff. And Libertarian Party is explicitly not handing you stuff, which means it's explicitly bad at politics. Again, you may hate that truth about politics, but until you've got a plan to get rid of the state in perpetuity, that isn't like a complete clown show, then this is going to be a reality of politics. And because the Libertarian Party can't acknowledge that, they can't win anything. And this is just as true for Elon if he starts a new party as it would be for the Libertarians, because it would be just as bad as the Libertarian Party when it comes to its lack of political constituency, but even worse because it wouldn't have the infrastructure and everything else that at least the Libertarian Party has, ballot access, all these practical things that have to be done if you want to be successful in the American political system. Again, you can hate everything about these truths, but they are truths. Like, so don't throw some like empty I've got principles thing at me. Like, how are you going to fix these problems specifically? And if you don't know how to fix those problems, then why are you pretending that this is going to be any different for you because you just change the name of the Libertarian Party? I don't see the difference here.
Yeah, and I want to go back maybe 32 years ago to the December 1993 Rothbard-Rockwell report, where Rothbard writes, and again, Murray Rothbard, probably one of the most towering giants of 20th century libertarian thought. He's absolutely correct. If you were to read his old articles, like The Strategy for the Right, when he was campaigning for Pat Buchanan right before his death, and had sort of given you this history of sort of what libertarianism had done in terms of conservatism, but he's writing against sort of like big government libertarianism, or what he would call the modal libertarian. And I'm just going to read a little bit for you here. He says, the modal libertarian, in short, is an arrested, now aging adolescent in permanent rebellion against institutions and moral principles that he sees as a check rein on his wayward appetite. Scratch any modal, therefore, and you will find that while the state is the most obvious coercer, his deepest hatred is reserved for the Christian church. And he writes further on, the modal left libertarian is a profile that applies to the comfortable DC think tank analyst as well as to the scruffiest libertarian nomad. The modal libertarian is a hedonist and narcissist, and while he hates and reviles not so much the state as all external social pressures that prevent or discourage him from doing his thing, his pursuit of hedonic goodies, drugs, all forms of sex, and generally leading a sporadic and dissolute life. And you see that a lot, whether it's in the Cato Institute with that Alex Noritesh guy or whatever his how to pronounce his last name, telling you, oh, well, you just hate these people or you don't actually have solutions to these things. Well, all that you're doing is expressing to me your own sort of like, well, I just want to make money or I just want to do whatever I think is right. And the actual conservative concerns about the power of the state against our natural, unbroken, unspoken, innate bonds between peoples or between what makes a nation, a faith, or a language, all of those things kind of get thrown out the window for the sake of making money, making power, or not caring about it. We have people that consider themselves libertarians or conservatarians, whether it's Hannah Cox or others, that will happily defend a gentleman who used to work for the Manhattan Institute, transitioning for the sake of a sexual fetish, and then say, well, this is conservative, or that this is fine, or even having the National Review defend the U.S. Naval ship, the Harvey Milk. Like, these are where we're at. And so, yes, I respect principles. I have a lot of things that I agree with Murray Rothbard and Lou Rockwell on. They're intellectual giants, far more intelligent than I probably ever will be in my life. But at the end of the day, the things that they warned about over 30 years ago has constituted a lot of the majority of libertarian politics today, which is tragic. So for the sake of this, like, let's have a third party or let's do something else. Well, Elon, let's see what you've supported over the last 6 months. You only supported Trump after he was almost assassinated, either by state forces or by those associated with the state in Butler, Pennsylvania. You have terrible political instincts when it comes to getting what you want and learning that you have tied yourself to a ship that you've kind of already burnt the bridge on when it comes to the Trump camp, because Democrats aren't going to welcome you back with open arms either. Democrats do not like apostates, because once you leave and then you try and come back and saying, oh, I was wrong and fooled, they usually just hang the prodigal son. They don't welcome him back with a feast of a fatted calf or anything like that. Your money will not save you if another Democrat gets into office. They will put you in jail, or they will put you through the ringer of congressional investigation after another. And so you support more immigration. You treat America like a sports team rather than a nation, which means you can trade people in and out for whatever country they need to come from. And most of your supporters online happen not to be American at all and tend to be foreign-born investors and entrepreneurs living in the United States or elsewhere across the country. So for me, like, okay, cool. It's a less American version of Ross Perot, who raised very concerning issues about American government and its spending in the 1992 election, but nevertheless allowed Bill Clinton to take office. So yeah, it's the economy, stupid. I do agree, but our economy would be a lot better if we focused on the one most important issue about our sovereignty, which is deporting millions of people who should not be in this country to begin with. Then you can start addressing the most fundamental issues of our fiscal policy. But until we have a system that either restricts the franchise, therefore not everyone has to get a cutout or has to get Gibbs or whatever you want to call it, or we try and find a way to make this system work with what we have, which has been the ongoing way Congress has always made money, then until I see a probable solution on how to fix this that's realistic and attaining power, I don't see it happening. So for individuals like Musk who want a third party or a different way, I sympathize with the impulse, because I don't really consider myself a Republican or a Democrat either. I kind of hold my nose and vote for Republican because at least that side is nominally anti-baby killing and kind of supports some of my interests, maybe, I don't know, 10% of the time, over a party that outright hates me and wants to replace me. But Elon, you're no better at this either. And if I wanted to be cruel about it, I would say, oh, look, it's another gentleman with a Star Wars name telling me what I should do with my nation and my people. And that's ridiculous. So I think that he should probably learn a lesson or two from Rothbard and Rockwell instead of posting ye old Milton Friedman clips about the pencil and how it gets made with respects to free trade. A lot more political power and lessons he could learn from people like Rothbard, Rockwell, or even Nick Land.
Yeah, and that's kind of as you've made the joke many times. If only libertarians would read libertarians, they would know the wisdom that's being passed
God
down.
knows we have,
Well, and you had there was one gentleman who had laid out basically the same argument you just did, Elon. Like, look, man, the Democrats are going to arrest you. The minute they get into power, they're going to destroy your business. They're going to take all your stuff and they're going to throw you in jail. Like, you basically made sure that Trump won the election through the purchasing of Twitter and your funding of him. They're not going to forget that. Like, these people are not the kind of people who are just going to be like, well, you win some, you lose some. Like, no, they're going to destroy you. they're going to put you in jail. They're going to take all of your money and all of your companies. They're going to nationalize everything. You're going to be toast. And Elon acknowledged this. He said, yeah, that's probably right. Right. Like he acknowledged this online, but then he immediately forgets the basic lesson. Right. The basic lesson is this is not some abstract game of principle. You're literally fighting for your own existence. And you knew this when you supported Trump, but for some reason you're so caught up on like the spending on this one bill that you can't see the forest for the trees here. And of course, speaking of Nick Land, Elon also ends up actually arguing with Nick Land on Twitter over this as well. He responds to Nick in a few of the posts that they're talking about. And basically, Nick Land is just saying, look, Elon, you are not a politician. Like, you are never going to be better at politics than Donald Trump. And whether you like it or not, Donald Trump is the guy who's going to create this vehicle for you to get to Mars. And so why not, you are monomaniacally focused on Mars for the most part. Why not just do that and leave the politics to the guy who's good at politics? Like, I think Nick basically said, are you really going to take all of your engineering talents, like your once in a generation ability to produce this program that could take us to the stars, and spend it on building a less effective Libertarian Party? Is that really the way that you're going to invest your time and your effort? Or are you just going to recognize that this is a losing battle? You're not going to get everything you want. And ultimately, you're going to have to take a lump or two on your way to the stars. And the answer seems to be no. He's going to blow all of his social capital on this, trying to get rid of Trump, trying to get rid of the party. Again, I don't know if this is just another blow up. Maybe, it's another round of drugs. I just don't know. But ultimately, Elon has to understand this. And so I guess the question becomes, obviously, we know that the Libertarian Party has a lot of very just basic functional problems, the strategy, the way the politics is played. We know that there's a losing game here on a lot of levels. But the one X factor with Elon is, of course, his money. Whether you agree ultimately with the viability of this project or not, Elon Musk's ability to purchase Twitter and to fund Trump's campaign was instrumental to Donald Trump winning. I don't think that means that Elon directly won the whole thing for Trump. I think Trump did a lot of the work. Surviving a bullet, it was pretty heroically, was pretty big for this. But ultimately, Elon was a big puzzle piece. I'm not going to downplay the role that he was involved in for this election. And so the question is, could he take that money and, despite the deep problems with the libertarian ideology, still create a credible threat that could pull a lot of support away from Trump at the end of the day?
No, I think that's very clear. Is that between American voters that are going to be participating in an election, all that it's going to do is open up a very small, concerned group of people that may or may not have the ability to vote in an election, and instead, just openly push that leverage even further, that this is about America versus those that think that America, as you and I know it, should not exist. And that, I think, for Elon Musk, this is about maybe a personal vendetta or a gripe. And I would understand, like, hey, man, I put a lot of money behind you. And don't get me wrong, like, the stuff that he did with the America PAC in the 24 election was smart. Like, we're going to pay people to help get others, like, register to vote and to vote for Donald Trump. We're going to pay for buses to get people in there. And I'm like, wow, someone is campaigning like a Democrat, which means they actually want to win. And that was amazing. And it's a shame that, that goodwill and that relationship has been fizzled out over things inside this bill, when even Musk had said during the campaign trail on Joe Rogan, listen, if the Democrats win and, get amnesty or whatever, you will never get a chance to have the country ever again. And so while this bill has a lot of things wrong with it primarily being a border bill, that's the reason to support it. But instead, we're getting to watch this epic blowout on Twitter over issues of, again, people primarily of foreign-born origin trying to support Musk and to support these fiscal positions, tells me that no, he's not really going to go anywhere with it. And even if you did get a political party up and running, you're now going to encounter the same problem that the Greens, all these like traditional worker parties, all these like constitutional, conservative parties, and the libertarians have faced for years, which is that the Republicans and Democrats will spend millions of dollars making sure that you cannot be on the ballot in every single state in the country. And it'll be a miracle if the America Party ends up being on the ballot during an election at all. And if anything, you might get a write-in candidate. And Musk can't even run for president anyways because he's not a natural born US citizen, even though he's over 35 and lives in the US. So to me, it's like, okay, well, what's going to last longer? A cult of personality that has been around for decades as this like American chauvinistic 1980s, we're so back entrepreneur, or at the end of the day, kind of a Reddit left-leaning libertarian that has burnt most of his political bridges with very poor political instincts. And I think we both know the answer to that one.
Well, and it's also difficult to take him seriously on some level because he's like, well, I'm very worried about government spending. That's all I really care about. But Trump has pointed repeatedly to the fact that Elon lost his subsidies in this bill. And obviously, Elon is very heavily invested in the electronic, or rather the electrical vehicle market, right? The alternative vehicles are a big, moneymaker for him with Tesla and everything. This is what he's known for a large part. And so the fact that so many of those, so many of his businesses, be it SpaceX or Tesla or all these, Starlink, are to some degree reliant on government contracts is a pretty big deal. Like Elon was more or less in bed with the American government in pretty much every venture he's involved in. Obviously, SpaceX is a direct replacement for NASA, which means the government has to pay him to make this happen. Starlink is used by all these different government organizations, a big defense contractor, and other contracts for him. Obviously, the carve out for electric vehicles was a big part of his success when it came to different aspects of Tesla. And so Elon Musk is not some guy who was allergic to government spending or government handouts previously. He, in fact, built his entire business model in several sectors on making money off the US government. And so the idea that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Elon Musk is now this huge budget hawk, I'm having a hard time believing that. And honestly, I think Trump's explanation, well, this is just you getting sour grapes over the fact that you didn't get this giant carve out for government spending, I think is the actual problem. If Elon Musk didn't like government spending, he had several opportunities to reduce his involvement in increasing the American budget. And he every time chose to make money off of the American government, the American taxpayer. But now all of a sudden, Elon's very concerned about this. And it just so happens to be at the same time, he loses a critical carve out that enabled his business to grow. In fact, I know several people in my personal life who are involved in some kind of aspect of alternative energy, electric, this kind of thing. They were getting the subsidies from the government because it was tied to Tesla. Those are gone, and now they're having serious business problems. So does Elon Musk really care about the budget, or did Elon just lose a nice, favorable carve out he was receiving? And all of a sudden, that's the explanation for why he is suddenly this, huge fan of cutting the deficit and making sure that we're not spending too much money.
Yeah, and I decided to just do a quick little look through his Twitter account during the time that like Barack Obama was in office, because he's been on Twitter since 2009, and not really anything mentioning here about the debt ceiling or government spending or anything like that from what I can see. And so it's particularly interesting about that. Like, so for instance, if we were to look up like deficit spending or anything like that, these key words from, let's say all that time here. And really all that I'm seeing about here is about testifying about the monopoly contract between Lockheed and Boeing, or about the goal for unsubsidized solar power, to be better and more efficient than, fracking or anything like that. But so far, nothing that would seem like he's really talking about these political issues back when things were going pretty under a large electric vehicle push under the Obama administration. And that's good to know, right? So it just illustrates to me that, these are some really poorly executed political moves that are very transparent, very telegraphed. It's like baby's first boss fight in politics, and it's not a very strong one. And so it's like, okay, this is where we're at. Overall, like, I get it, Musk. Like, these things are important. I don't think that Auron or I are going to object to saying, hey, deficit spending and this massive, like, crushing debt that America has passing on to its future generations is a good thing. Yeah, it could definitely needs to be reined in under control. But I also want my children to grow up in a country where the language that they were raised in is still spoken in public, or is not going to have to live under South Africanized conditions of armed guards at major stores or barred windows everywhere out of fear of break-in. And I think that that's the important thing to consider out of all of this is, do you want a country, or do you want to just win on your principles?
And you think that Elon Musk, being somebody who came from a country that is currently in very serious, dire straits, due to many of the assumptions that the Democrats make, would understand this. Yeah, he would understand this. I mean, this is a guy who has repeatedly posted the phrase "demographics are destiny," and yet here we are. Oh no, apparently destiny is $20 billion on homeland security spending. I'm a little more suspect on that. I think ultimately you're motivated more by the fact that you got snubbed by a guy who you supported when it came time to get your special carve out than I am thinking that you're suddenly like this bastion of fiscal responsibility. I just have a hard time believing that. And ultimately, the truth is Elon's probably going to forget about this. He's not going to engage in this. I don't think he's going to build a whole new party and fund all these candidates to oppose Republicans. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think ultimately he knows that that's not the path to go down, or he'll get distracted by something else and will focus somewhere else. But I think it is worth paying attention because again, he has had a massive impact on the political landscape just due to his funding and his ability to purchase online platforms. And you can't just ignore that when the world's richest man, one of the most influential people on the planet, says, "Well, I'm going to wage jihad against Donald Trump." Obviously, like I said, I don't think he'll eventually follow through with that, but it's worth recognizing that there's a motivation behind that, and it's probably not just purely principled at the end of the day. Well, we have several super chats here. We should probably get to the questions of the people, but before we do, Mr. Prudentialist, where should people find your work?
You can find me on YouTube, on Twitter, anywhere where you can find this lovely little amphibious profile picture. If you're a fan of my work, subscribestar.com/The Prudentialist. I cover all sorts of things from digital media and its impact on modern day politics, as well as covering all sorts of political literature and understanding of American and also just Western history. If you're interested, I just recently had a show called Do You Even Read, where we covered this great book by Charles Norris Cochrane called Christianity and Classical Culture from Augustus to Augustine. And we looked at, just how the Roman state evolved under the adoption of Christianity and the bloody history behind that from both a pagan and Christian perspective. So if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, by all means, just go look for The Frog, and that's where I am.
Excellent. All right, guys, let's go to the questions of the people here. James Horner says, a victory should make the next victory easier. Pass the darn bill. Yes, the classic Curtis Yarvinism. A victory is that which moves you closer to achieving your goal. And this is, again, the point, right? Power is achieved in this instance by reducing the number of Democratic voters. If you reduce the number of potential Democratic voters, you will make your next victory more likely. If you reduce the number of illegals in the country, you will make cutting spending easier. So yes, this bill doesn't give you everything you want immediately. In fact, you have to compromise. You have to be an adult. You have to think about what you're giving up in order to get what you need. And ultimately, the trade-off here, I think, is pretty obvious as long as you are considering the ramifications of continued occupation of illegal immigrants in the United States. Yes, I understand that just spreadsheet-wise somewhere, you see the number go up and therefore bad. But you really have to think about the effects that each one of these things will achieve once they're implemented. And ultimately, driving down immigration also drives down spending. It's just not immediate. You have to have a little bit of discipline, a little bit of foresight. Machiavellius says, I like that guy with funny hair that asked hookers to name 10 books they have read. I don't know if that's like a man on the street interview thing or something, but I'm sure that would be hilarious.
Yeah, it's a man on the street kind of video.
Okay. Philosophical Thirstworm says, Paul Ryan rubbing his hands, his time is here. Yes, it's time for the neocons to strike back. The young guns will return to power here. Let's see. Thirstworm also says, very suspicious, heavily leveraged CEO. Elon ignores the effect of interest rates on debt. You can check Elon has never posted about Jerome Powell. Yeah, again, very narrow observation of when he seems to care deeply about these issues. They seem to be directly tied to the benefit of him personally or his companies, and less about abstract principle. I'm sure there are more principled libertarians who would have supported this either way. But the fact that they are boosting Elon, somebody who hasn't exactly, again, had a history of aversion to government spending, that reveals kind of their own mercenary quality, right? So ultimately, don't tell me how the conservatives are a personality cult of Trump if you're willing to jump on board with Elon the minute he makes noises that you like, even though his history is exactly the opposite.
Agreed.
No Guard says, ideally, Elon would fund primaries against the Republicans who refuse to support border funding without trillions of pork rather than throwing the money away. Right. There is an option here, right? Like you could say, okay, I like the border funding aspects of the bill. I hate the pork. So I am going to put specific pressure on Republicans who are insufficiently focused on border security or said that they wouldn't vote for it as long as they were not getting the pork that they wanted along with it. He had that option, but he didn't. He just focused in general on the spending without noticing the core of the bill. And again, this is the problem, right? You got to be able to read the room. You can't get focused entirely on one issue and not understand what's going on. As you said, this is a border funding bill. That's what it was for. That's its main purpose. It's very unfortunate that it's not perfect. It's very far from, but that was the focus. And you could at least address the issue while expressing your problems with the bill. And yet we didn't get anything from that. We just hear we get Rand Paul and Thomas Massie dickering over the cost of ICE when we should be cutting like literally anything else at this point.
Yeah, and it's important to note that Massie and Rand Paul are not very strong border hawks on anything either, and they've been pretty open about trying to work some kind of agreement when it comes to legal immigration in the past.
Yeah, and I'm sorry again. I know there are libertarians who are good on the border, but let's be honest, the Libertarian Party and even libertarians in general are not. There are even people who make noises about how you should have border security. Ultimately, they do not they do not value it very highly and are willing to put it well down on the priority list and are willing to cut deals. Like you said, ultimately, Rand Paul and Thomas Massie are not for secured borders. They're more than willing to find a way, cut a deal. And this is just not what the bill was for. It's not what MAGA is about. It's not what the American people were hoping from the Republican Party. And so pretending and trying to hold the whole thing hostage over it, I think is just disingenuous. Logo says, when you vote for deficit spending, you vote for the neoliberal patronage network. And, obviously there's some truth to this, right? The question is, to what extent, right? Is all deficit spending, no matter what it's spent on, exactly the same? Is it always going to a bunch of college kids who would otherwise be unemployed if they didn't have gender studies degree? Sorry, but I think that's probably less true of ICE than it is when it comes to some kind of bureau of equity, or diversity, inclusion, whatever, right? Like, sorry, but ultimately these are different things. I hear you. Ending fiscal responsibility or having a more fiscally responsible program would end a lot of the patronage that goes to the left. Ultimately, I agree that is a goal at the end of the day. But right now, if you want to achieve that goal, you've got to end the constant flow of Democratic voters into the United States. The only way to do that is to have border security. I know you don't like it, but that's the way it is.
And I mean, this would be what I would, this is what Doge really did a good job exposing and would hopefully cut is listen, unless you're going to be willing to defund and absolutely destroy these patronage networks that almost exclusively go left wing, then there's really no point, because if we still have it, then it's going to inevitably be owned by my enemies. And I get it. There's a lot of stuff about patronage that I would love to see cut and reduced, but until there's a reasonable way to turn that spigot off and we expel leftism in a Hans Hermann Hoppe way of physical removal, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Although I do agree with you. I really do.
Mick A says, please support the Angel of America amendment to turn the Mississippi Delta into a black reservation as the formal act of reparations. In turn, this nation recognizes the U.S. as the racial ratio of 1965. Best of luck with that, sir. And then we have Chancey Hart, who says, I'm not surprised by Elon's antics. Him and Trump have nothing in common. Honestly, I think MAGA is better off without his this autist in a bad way. Again, I think ultimately that having the sway that the tech right brings, both financially and culturally, and just influence-wise across media and technology and all of these things, is ultimately a boon for the United States. If you want to go to Mars, if you think ultimately that mankind's destiny is in the stars, or that America is a frontier nation defined by its ability to conquer things and therefore needs a new frontier in space, then I think that actually Elon is critical at some level to the moving forward of the United States in a healthy direction. But he's got to it's again, it's like Nick Land said, your job is to get us to Mars. Trump's job is to make everything else work. You've got to just trust that plan. Like this is a case where you got to be a plan truster and not get stuck in the minutia. Elon's just not a political actor. He's not a political genius. He's a genius in other ways, but this is just not where his skill set lies. And if he can't stop himself from throwing a tantrum every time he doesn't get exactly what he wants, then he's going to constantly be in this scenario where he's looking for a new outlet, for a new political way to move forward, and finding none. And in the meantime, as Prudentialist pointed out, he's putting himself in very dangerous situation because the Democrats are not going to forget. They're not going to forget what he did, and they are going to punish him. And so if he ends up splitting the Republican vote by funding some other party, or just sits out and ultimately reduces the impact that the right has, he's only going to hurt himself, because if the left comes back to power, that man is not going to stay out of jail, or at the very least, he's not going to be in possession of his companies. And if he doesn't know that, then he is an idiot. All right, guys, we're going to, oh, nope, we got one more. Sorry, I got distracted there. I can do this. Astrogath. All right, that's as much as I'm throwing in a G there for no reason. The Grim says libertarianism is a tool used to sap right-wing energy. It's used as utopian as communism. Unfortunately, I think the last part is true. The communists want to remove the profit motive, the greed of humanity, and libertarians want to remove the state. And both are just realities of human nature. The state is as constant as pretty much everything except the family and religion in human existence. As long as humans have existed, there has been some kind of authority to social organization, and it's not going anywhere. So pretending that you're going to kind of just solve all the problems by getting rid of this is as utopian as any communist understanding of human nature.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, those things are just hard, basic truths of reality, just like death and taxes are certainties in our American system. And it just reiterates what we had said earlier, that government needs to be ran by effective government and political actors. Whereas for Musk, I will always praise him for sort of reinvigorating and embarrassing NASA for having a space program that doesn't make America as reliant on the Russians. And he should continue to do that. But with regards to libertarianism, modern libertarianism has kind of gone the way in which Rockwell and Rothbard had decried and warned about over 30 years ago. And for us right now, the good things of libertarianism can easily be incorporated into a conservative or reactionary model of government. And that's what we should be doing. But for now, we have to recognize that you're not going to escape the state. You're not going to escape power. You're not going to escape hierarchy or organization. Things that have been innately part of mankind, literally since the Garden of Eden, are not going away anytime soon.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. But as always, if you have not checked out Mr. Prudentialist's work, you should absolutely do so. And if it's your first time on this channel, you need to go ahead and click subscribe, the bell, notifications, all that stuff, so you know when we go live. If you'd like to get these broadcasts as podcasts, make sure you subscribe on the Auron MacIntyre show, or to the Auron MacIntyre show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you do, leave that rating or review. It helps with the algorithm. And of course, if you want to check out Blaze TV's content, why not get that 7-day free trial? You just got to do that before July 4th. So make sure you're celebrating the 4th by getting that subscription. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And as always, I will talk to you next time.